Of a Linear Circle, Part 1, Chapter 5. 6 Impossible Things Before Breakfast. Nazar is trying to decide if he should hate existence, and if so, to what degree. He wasn't sure what to expect from this meeting, but not actually a portrait had never made the list of possibilities. He can't remember where he was born, or anything of his childhood. He recalls bits of events from Hogwarts during his years of teaching, of friends and family. He has scattered memories from the portrait until the 1800s, when his recollection becomes more or less linear. He also isn't sure what to make of Albus Dumbledore. The current headmaster strikes Nazar as a chess player, one who knows he has to win the game and isn't above sacrificing something important to achieve that goal. Nazar doesn't necessarily disagree with the need for sacrifice, but he'd prefer to avoid it, especially if there are better or more entertaining solutions at hand. I suppose we shall have to find you a place to reside within the castle, Dumbledore is saying. Of course, this is the worst possible time for such an interesting addition. Nazar glances at Severus. Is this the ministry nonsense you were complaining about last month? Severus nods. Our current defense against the dark arts instructor really isn't. Nazar knows Severus has a much stronger opinion on the matter, but for some reason isn't voicing it. He's either leery of Dumbledore as well, or has already said as much and feels no need to repeat himself. Dolores Umbridge holds the post at the moment, Dumbledore explains. She is a ministry oversight from the current Minister for Magic, who refuses to believe Voldemort has returned, and that he is a threat. Dolores is looking for excuses for Minister Fudge to be able to bring me up on charges, which is the only way the ministry can directly interfere with Hogwarts. That is the sort of cowardice that will get people killed. Nazar is not impressed with their minister's logic. If we locate Voldemort, can we perhaps just give him this Minister Fudge? No, Severus, Dumbledore says when he notices that Severus is smiling at the idea. Well, score one to Nazar then. He hasn't seen Severus look that pleased by anything in ages. Do you know her? Severus asks. Dolores? Oh, yes. She had a love affair with Pink while everyone else was trying to have a love affair with other people's body parts. She also had that lovely habit of only speaking to people she thought could raise her station in life, Nazar replies. That aside, unless things have changed a lot in the past year, the ministry isn't supposed to have the authority to name a teacher to a post in this school. Dumbledore nods. Normally that is true, but we did not have anyone who could take the post this year. Otherwise, I would most certainly have avoided it. Ah, Nazar thinks about it for a few seconds before he realizes that yes, he is going to be fool enough to volunteer. You might not have had one before, but you do now. You were also a portrait an hour ago, Severus reminds him dryly. Yes, there is that. How would we explain you? Dumbledore asks. Explain what? Tell people the truth. It isn't as if you don't have four founders. Nazar jerks his thumb back up over his shoulder at the portrait, where Godric, Salazar, Rowena, and Helga are still lurking, who can confirm the story to anyone who asks. Dumbledore eyes the founders. A truth not easily believed. Now you sound like you're seeking convenient excuses, Nazar says in a flat voice. Do you want to be rid of the ministry toady or not? You need a defense instructor. I am currently homeless and possibly penniless. I have no other way yet to establish myself in this world aside from being exactly who I am, even if I can't remember large parts of my life. And you're overlooking an advantage. An advantage? Dumbledore meets his eyes. Nazar averts his gaze. In my day, what you just attempted was a dueling offense. Do it again, and you will discover exactly why I was Hogwarts defense instructor. Ah, a practicing occlumens? Dumbledore asks in what appears to be genuine curiosity. Nazar wonders how often someone threatens to kill this man, given that he refuses to take the threat seriously. They're called separate things now. We just called them manners, Nazar says crossly. Severus interrupts Nazar's desire to turn someone rude into a pile of ash. You wish to terrify Voldemort. The evidence of one of his ancestors returned, angry and wanting him dead. Terrified would hopefully be one result, Nazar says, trying to be civil. The other possibility is that the idea drives him to seek me out. wanting affirmation that he's holding true to Salazar's ways, and wanting familial acceptance. What makes you think the latter? At least Dumbledore isn't trying to pry into his thoughts any longer. As long as that incident doesn't repeat itself, the school won't need a new headmaster. That's what Tom Marvolo Riddle wanted in 1938. He might not have acknowledged me beyond a single rude comment, but I listened. Riddle's plans were already a threat to others, but the head of Slytherin House at the time ignored me. As did the next two, actually. It's very hard to warn people of danger if you've been stuffed into a corner to be forgotten. A bloody corner? Salazar sounds angry and upset. Your portrait was supposed to remain above the fireplace. That would explain the preservation charm's failure with his memories, Helga muses as Nazar turns around. When was it moved? Nazar shakes his head. Helga, I have no idea. I don't even remember it happening. Someone had to have moved it back, Rowena says. I did. Severus merely looks at the founders when they stare at him. I didn't know it was the portrait's original home. I simply felt it was a more suitable location. You are in the records as defense teacher for Hogwarts, one who never officially retired from the post, I might add, and one who was also not listed as dying. I admit I had always been curious about that lack of detail. Nazar returns his attention to Dumbledore. You would truly do this. I believe it would save us a great deal of trouble in regards to Dolores Umbridge's presence, but it would endanger you. As you said, regardless of which Voldemort wants, you will certainly attract his attention. If that happens, I can make Voldemort dead that much faster. Nazar hides a yawn in his sleeve. However, it's nearing midnight on Halloween, and believe it or not, I really had planned on sleeping tonight. Can we handle the details of my reinstatement tomorrow? He also needs a place to sleep. Maybe. Maybe he had one. Has one? Damn it, he can't remember that either. Severus is right about his language, too. Was he like this before, or did he develop the vocabulary in direct response to living amongst teenagers for almost 10 centuries? For tonight, at least, there is available space in my quarters, and you are directly of Slytherin's house, Severus says. We can meet again in the morning, Albus. I am certain Minister Fudge will be overjoyed to greet Dolores's replacement. Dumbledore nods. His eyes are still narrowed, though they're also twinkling in a way that speaks of mischief. Nazar wonders what house the man was in to have created a magician who thinks the way this one does. That would be a kindness, Nazar says to Severus, one I don't know how to repay. Kill Voldemort. I'll consider us even, Severus replies. That really is an imbalanced debt, Nazar mutters, glaring at Severus when the hint of a smug smile appears on his face. Then I will see you both again in the morning, Dumbledore says. I will delay the minister until something more reasonable for that meeting. 10 o'clock, I should think. Good night. Good evening, Nazar says automatically. He still does not know what to make of that man. Severus once again has Nazar precede him, so Nazar waits at the top of the stairwell as Severus closes the office door. His eyes are on the stone staircase, which is slowed to a halt and is now moving in the opposite direction. Do the other stairs do this? He asks on the way down. No, this was likely done for a headmaster feeling too infirm to bother with a short flight of stairs, and decided the children should have the joy of climbing 7 flights of stairs instead. Ah, I see. Nazar is scowling when he steps off the stairs on the ground floor, though the wall slides back promptly to let him out. It's best for the children with crutches, braces, or canes to have the joy of such a thing. Severus gives him a sidelong look. I didn't say I agreed. I'm just glad that my Slytherins have to deal with the least amount of stairs, but for the dormitories. I know. I've seen you make it abundantly clear that the upper-level dormitories are for those who need them, not for spoiled seventh years. Nazar pauses long enough to scratch the gargoyle again. Have you been behaving yourself, Galfredus? Just doing my job, Galfredus replies, eyes closed in gargoyle bliss. That isn't necessarily the same thing. Nazar follows Severus back down the corridor, aware that the portraits are tracking him again. He doesn't recall who any of these painted people are, but they, for some reason, all seem to know exactly who he is. Severus's quarters are warded against intruders in a way that Nazar finds pleasing. Paranoia keeps one alive, especially in dangerous environs. The inside is comfortable, if still obviously an underground dwelling. The rug on the floor is possibly white, but between his eyesight and the torches, it's difficult to tell. There are numerous bookshelves, which Nazar gazes at like a dying man in the desert, falling headfirst into an oasis. A single sofa, the cushions likely a darker red. Severus doesn't strike him as being all that thrilled by orange. There is a stone fireplace with a mantelpiece that holds only a wooden clock. To Nazar's right and left at opposite ends of the room are doors, both closed. "You're 42 years old," Severus says after he shuts the door, reactivating the wards. "You're older than I am." "You're taller than I am." Nazar gives him a wide-eyed look of innocence when Severus frowns. "What? I thought we were exchanging nonsensical statements." "Nonsensical," Severus lets out a sigh. "You're right, 978. "In paint years, maybe," Nazar says, and Severus chokes mid-breath and ends up stifling laughter. "Nazar!" Nazar grins. "Sorry, everything has been truly confusing, and I really couldn't take it any longer. I'm 1020, Severus, but I wasn't kidding about your height. You're taller than I expected." "Fair enough." Severus is still trying not to smile as he glances down at Nazar. "I did have a similar realization earlier. You're much shorter than I thought. And now I can't say anything because everything I'm thinking of is either a horrible euphemism or wildly inappropriate," Nazar says. He's shorter than Severus, yes, but he's also 1,000 years removed from the man's birth. Everyone but Godric had been bloody short in those days, except for the Norse. "That's never stopped you before." "That is because I was in my home, and you were technically in a part of yours," Nazar replies. "I'm currently your guest at the moment, and that would be rude. There is a certain amount of decorum to be observed." "Of course," Severus smirks at him. "I do find it interesting that wildly inappropriate and horrible euphemism are considered separate categories. And you are staring at me. That, at least, is easy to explain. You look different here." Nazar glances down at his hands. "Even I look different." "I never asked before. It seemed rude." "What was it like staring out from the portrait?" Severus asks. "Like gazing through a glass wall. It alters your perception of size, obviously, but color, details. No one I could see looked the way I did. But you're three-dimensional in a way I was starting to—" Nazar frowns. "I was starting to lose my grasp on what that meant, actually." "I think you're correct about needing sleep," Severus says, which is a blatant change of subject that Nazar appreciates being granted. "There is a bathroom through there," he says, pointing at the door to Nazar's right, closest to the door that leads out. "I don't know what to do about your clothes. Perhaps the house elves will have ideas." Nazar nods. In his portrait, they were fine and suited his surroundings. In 1995, they are beyond archaic. "Thank you." He fiddles with the modern doorknob before figuring out how it functions and then closes the door. The bathing room is a private, tiled space, but sounds refuse to echo. He toes off his boots and walks over to the water basin, the sink, and looks into the mirror hanging on the wall above it. Nazar looks younger than 42. But Salazar always said magicians of their age or their line aged well. His eyes are the palette of greens, browns, and golds he's familiar with. Salazar's eyes are the same, though his hold more green. His skin is bronze, like the Moors and the Persians in the eastern deserts. No, Persia is no longer called that. But he can't remember the correct name for that land now. He doesn't even think the Moors are referred to like that. His nose is not too narrow or too wide, perhaps a bit snub. His mouth is generous. The lines near his eyes suggest humor rather than petulance. He recognizes the man he's staring at in the mirror. He doesn't know himself at all. What is nearly 1,000 years spent in a portrait done to his mind? "Kanza, speak to me." Kanza uncurls herself from his neck and glides down his sleeve to curl up in his hands. She is still as beautiful as the day she shed her first infant skin, revealing glistening black scales overlaid by glittering green gold. Her eyes are brilliant emeralds beneath her first eyelids. Of course, you're more recognizable to me than my own face, Nazar says. That is because you spent a lot of time looking at me. Kanz's tongue flicks out to taste his skin. You are frightened. Why? I don't feel like myself. Nazar strokes her head and uses his fingernails to scratch behind the ridges that will become her horns after a century of growth. I am in a safe place, but do not worry, Kanza says. I am here. I will protect you. Nazar smiles. I don't doubt that at all. Care to join me in the bath, or will you wait on the warm stones before it? Stones, Kanza decides. Nazar removes his robe, wondering if the material is made from can be retailored to something more modern. The fabric is too fine to simply discard. He hangs it on a peg on the wall that's shaped like a merperson's arm, which is fortunately ceramic, but unfortunately it brings more horrible euphemisms to mind. The bathtub isn't difficult to figure out. Not much has changed in that regard aside from the nature of what plugs the drain and the fact that he now has two faucets to turn for water, both of which are labeled. He's really not sure what to make of any of the soaps and decides he's going to enjoy hot water and figure out the rest later. Besides, the only dirt he's picked up came from the slithering common room fireplace hearthstones. The bath fills much faster than he's used to. He hurries to pull off his linen shirt, truest, and woolen socks, leaving them in a neat pile on a shelf that is either designed for that purpose or just happens to be conveniently available. When he slides into hot, steaming water, he has a brief flash of memory, something gold in his mind's eye, and then it's gone again. Odd, but not surprising. Rowena did say he should have patience with himself. Nazar. Nazar jerks upright at his name and the sharp knock that accompanies it. He splashes water onto the stone floor, which causes Kanza to hiss from the irritation at being soaked before she tears him a new one. I'm fine, he yelps, wincing at the pathetic quality of his voice. Unexpected napping, that's all. He apologizes to Kanza and finds a towel that is quite honestly gigantic. Kanza joins him in the towel's confines to dry off. Nazar's clothing has been cleaned and hung near the bathing area. A set of modern pajamas are waiting for him on that same empty shelf. Sneaky house elves, Nazar says, while Kanza curls around his neck. The pajamas are black and too large, which means they probably belong to Severus. He was always a kind-hearted soul, even when he was desperately wanted to be otherwise. They're also true silk, not the shiny artificial satin he's sometimes seen pass through the common room. Creature comforts. He is spoiled rotten, and he doesn't care. Nazar has to roll up the trousers so he doesn't trip over the length, but otherwise the fit is decent. The shirt sleeves are cuffed and tight enough that he can slide his wand into place, and he's used to his shirts being long. Nazar gathers up his belongings and emerges from the bathroom to find Severus seated on the sofa, a book held in one long-fingered hand. He stares at Severus for what is possibly longer than polite or necessary before he can say anything. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take up so much of your evening, especially the part where I fell asleep in your bathtub. That is complete nonsense. Severus puts the book aside and stands up. This way. The other door reveals a sleeping chamber, a bedroom. We'll concern ourselves with other arrangements later. For tonight, I will sleep on that sofa. Before you protest, bear in mind that I'm spinning several mental wheels and won't be sleeping anytime soon. One of us should rest, and right now, that is you. You're just trying to make our deal in regards to killing Voldemort more balanced. Nazar forgets the words the moment they leave his lips. He was trying for something lighthearted, and that attempt failed miserably. Severus glances away. Perhaps I am. Nazar puts his clothing and boots down on the bedroom's rug before turning around. Severus. The moment Severus faces him again, Nazar steps forward and hugs him. Severus freezes, stunned into near petrification. I always wanted to hug the person who said that a mere portrait was his friend, Nazar whispers. Thank you. Severus gingerly pats Nazar's back and shoulder as if he doesn't know what else to do. You are welcome. Nazar releases him, sensing that if he does not, Severus might actually panic. Dear gods, he is going to hurt whoever taught his friend that the touch of another is a threat. Good night. Severus nods once. Sleep well. Nazar shuts the door before he blows out a single candle. He lies down on a bed with thick, soft sheets and a mattress that does not seem to be composed of bound ticking, contemplating the dark room. Kanza uncurls herself from his neck so that she can nest in his hair, as is her custom. Maybe I shouldn't have done that. For his sake, if not Severus's, now that he's concentrated on another's touch, he desperately wants it back. A preservation charm does not prevent loneliness. It will be fine, Kanza says. He likes you. He likes a portrait. She seems amused by that statement. Why does that make a difference? Nazar stares back up at the black ceiling. I don't know. He drops off soon after that and sleeps like a stone. He only awakens that morning when a house elf rouses him to tell him that it's 8 in the morning and breakfast is ready. Nazar blinks a few times in confusion, remembers everything that happened last night, and can barely get the words out of his throat that thank the elf. Then other details clamor for his attention. Wait. Yes, the elf asks. Nazar breathes until he feels some semblance of calm, which never takes long. A duelist who survives is one who can recover quickly. My clothes, my robes in particular. Is there any chance those could be altered into something that is of a more modern cut before 10 o'clock this morning? The material is too valuable to discard, but it's dated. The house elf smiles. We is being able to do that. If you let Filky measure you before breakfast, we can be getting you undergarments that fit too, Mr. Slytherin. You know my name? Nazar asks, trying not to feel foolish. House elves were still relatively new to Hogwarts in his time, and that was nearly 1,000 years ago. All the house elves of Hogwarts know of Nizar the Protector, the elf says, and vanishes in a pop of displaced air. With Kanza back in her usual position, Nazar goes out to breakfast, still dressed in borrowed pajamas. A table has been set up in the middle of the room, and the smell of food accompanies it. He stalls out, staring down at everything. He'd forgotten those scents, missing them without remembering he'd missed anything at all. If Severus slept on the sofa, he doesn't look it. The man's grooming is, as always, impeccable, though it's the first time in years Nazar has seen him without a coat, or coat and robes. He's in trousers with a white shirt tucked in, not worn loose. I think the elves overdid it. Why are you staring at me? Nazar tries not to wince. Because you're a real person, I could actually reach out and touch. That's why. It might be a little while before I get over that in regards to anyone. Well, not Dumbledore. Not if he keeps up with those blinding robes. Severus nods. He will not be inclined to dress otherwise. Then I will not be staring at him, Nazar says. Then Severus hands him tea, except it's like nothing Nazar can recall. It's fragrant and rich, a beautiful dark amber with sweetness lying beneath. Toasted bread and meats are familiar and easy to identify, though other foods are more interesting, like the cubed cane sugar from the Americas that sits in a container next to the honey. Curiosities aside, Nazar is also grateful that he hasn't forgotten how to eat. There had been water he could draw from a well in his portrait, but food had not been necessary or available. Nazar casts about in a desperate bid for conversation. Did you sleep? He's used to others conversing and departing, leaving him trapped and unable to follow. Now he's free, but he isn't used to the sensation. It almost makes him feel trapped anew. Somewhat, Severus admits. I worry about this meeting, though. I wonder if I should be present. The meeting with Minister Fudge and Dolores Umbridge. That is something Nazar can cope with. Why? I think Umbridge might be one of his. There is no mistaking who Severus means. If I'm part of the process that removes her from Hogwarts, it could endanger my position. I think your position as a spy might be in danger regardless, Nazar points out. A true Slytherin in Hogwarts again, one who supports you but rejects Voldemort. That will be immediate cause for suspicion. It might be, Severus agrees. I shall simply have to do what I can for as long as I can. Nazar can't say anything, much as he'd prefer to beg Severus to stop spying on his insane great-grandnephew. If Voldemort were to find that child first, Severus needs to be in a position to do something about it. He glances down at his hands. They seem normal to his eyes, but there is a quality of life to them that always lacked in the portrait. He's not even sure he knows how to describe the difference to anyone, so he doesn't try. There is a silver ring on his left middle finger. He wonders if it's a marriage band until he turns it around to discover that it's Lazar's family crest etched into the metal. The Slytherin crest is similar, but lacks a few pertinent details. They called me Nizar the Protector, he murmurs. I don't remember why. Defense is a form of protection, Severus says after a long moment of silence. I think it's meant to be more than that. It's etched into the runes on my wand, Nizar says. My very existence has placed you in grave danger, graver than you have been in since you left that bastard's service. It is a danger I am used to. Nizar nods. Fair enough. I suppose we'll just have to terrify the minister into allowing me to have my job back. Severus seems to be biting back a smile. Perhaps I should show you the textbooks for the subject, then. He stands to gather a stack of 7 slim books from one of his bookshelves. Nizar begins perusing them with a third cup of tea in his hand. Simple curiosity becomes ire. He glares up at Severus. These are complete rubbish. Severus lifts an eyebrow. Those are the instruction manuals approved by the school's board of governors. Are they all imbeciles? Nizar demands in disbelief. Yes, actually. I am not teaching this shit, Nizar says flatly. They can keep their books, but no, absolutely not. I refuse to teach children how to become easily slaughtered sheep. Severus finally allows himself a real smile. They are going to adore you, he says dryly. I don't care if they hate my entire existence as long as they listen to me, Nizar mutters. Nizar has just finished getting dressed in his clothes from last night when the house elves bring him his altered robes. The wool-blended silk has been retailored to fit modern lines and lengths. Part of the material was salvaged to make good fitted gloves for his hands, perfect for the weather in the north. He does appreciate the additional socks, which are not wool, but black-dyed cotton with an intriguing stretch. He sends back the undergarments. He is completely unfamiliar with modern undergarments and doesn't need the extra complication. In his time, an undergarment was a long linen shirt and nothing else. At least his gloves will fit in one of his robe pockets, of which there are now 5 instead of 2. The 5th, the elves tell him, has been altered with a charm for infinite available space. He is not sure infinite is a good idea, but it does save him from needing to carry any sort of bag. He slips his feet into his boots and pulls them on, then retreats to the bathroom long enough to regard the mirror again. It takes a great deal of water, combing, and swearing to tie his hair back so that it's a sleek tail without a hint of curl. But his family always told him that the affectation made him look more intimidating. He has a feeling that might be useful today, whereas charm-laced venom and being underestimated are his usual tools. It's probably easier to do this as a metamorph magus, Nazara thinks sourly. He has to figure out how to do that again. That's different, Severus observes, waiting by the door that leads back out into the castle. You look as if you're ready to kill someone. Nazar smiles. One never knows if it will be useful. I wouldn't know a thing about that. Lies, Nazar says under his breath. He's gratified when he can see humor lurking in Severus's eyes. Nazar follows Severus on the same route back to the headmaster's office, but this time there are students about. Hello, Miss Bulstrode. Hello, sir, Bulstrode greets him. Still not a painting, I see. He never was a painting, Severus snaps. Bulstrode blinks a few times. What? Tell everyone that I'll explain it to them this evening, Miss Bulstrode. 8 o'clock in the common room. Nazar shrugs at her when she gapes at them. You heard him. Might want to pass along the word. That's that's Pansy's job, Bulstrode sputters. And she's really bad at it, too, Nazar says. He doesn't get the chance to scratch a gargoyle statue. Severus has already whispered a password to Galfredus's ears. I'll be seeing you about, Miss Bulstrode. Yes, sir. Just in time, Dumbledore says as a man comes tumbling out of green flames in the fireplace. What the fuck? Nazar whispers. He already dislikes Minister Cornelius Fudge. The man hasn't done anything yet except stand up and write in his ugly hat, but Nazar can't stand him. Flu. I take it you did not have such a thing in your time. Severus murmurs in response. No, we could fucking desplars. Nazar watches as Dumbledore greets Fudge. Apparate. Some people, Severus pauses and glances at Fudge, are not good at apparition. Zure escolaratia gasi dituzzi, Nazar says. What does that mean? Severus asks. Oh, it's something Salazar used to say a lot. I can't remember why, though. Also, I'm not sure I recall what it means. A woman enters through one of the double doors. She's garbed in a pink sweater, a simpering smile on her face. Dolores. Nazar's wand is in his hand and pointing at her before he becomes fully aware of his own actions. It's instinct, completely unchanged by the passing centuries. His words emerge as a snarl of rage. Put it on the fucking desk. I beg your pardon. Umbridge draws herself up in offense. How dare you? Nazar puts the strength of his blood, training, and authority into his voice, and Hogwarts answers his call. Put it on the desk. Umbridge blinks a few times before drawing a quill from her bag. She drops it on Dumbledore's desk, steps back, and then shakes her head in confusion. How dare you? She repeats. How dare you bring that fucking thing into my school? Nazar roars back. That quill has been used recently, and it stinks of evil fueled by blood. Severus picks up the quill and then drops it wide-eyed. Dumbledore frowns and takes a handkerchief from his robes before he picks up the quill to study it. A blood quill? Oh, Dolores, I expect so much better from the Ministry. Is it indeed a blood quill? Fudge asks. At least the man sounds horrified. Nazar can barely see what's in front of him. This this mockery of a teacher harms students under her care with foul magic and scars, violating the safety of the walls in which he learned to become himself. Tell them. Umbridge scowls at Nazar. Of course it is, she declares haughtily. One must control the unruly in some manner. Nazar slowly lowers his wand. If he doesn't, he is going to kill her. That will not get him his job back. It's more likely to get him arrested, though he wouldn't linger in the castle for such a thing to happen. Still, it wouldn't be a brilliant start to his modern career. Cornelius, Dumbledore looks at the minister. I knew nothing of this. I did not approve this abuse, Fudge shouts. You're lying, Nazar smiles. And Hogwarts knows it. Fudge turns red and starts to sweat, which isn't improving Nazar's opinion of the man. I will admit that I gave Dolores Umbridge the full authority of my office to do what was necessary to root out corruption at Hogwarts, but that did not include violating wizarding laws regarding the use of dark artifacts. Better. Nazar is going to start trembling. He refuses to do so. Absolutely not. Not in front of that woman, who is even more disappointing now than she'd been as a teenager. Children can grow out of being horrible cretins, and she chose not to. Fudge adjusts the fit of his ridiculous-looking hat. And you, good sir, who are you? Umbridge tries to edge her way towards the door and finds her way blocked by an incensed, black-haired Slytherin. Severus glares at her until she drifts back towards the center of the room. Nazar's eyes on her convince the woman that it's safest to lurk near the fireplace. I am Nazar Harryfold Slytherin, brother of Salazar Slytherin, preserved in this school and brought forth the moment Hogwarts required a protector. The words spill from Nazar's lips as the castle's magic helps supply what is needed. Given what your agent has brought into these halls, I think Hogwarts' timing is accurate. I will be staying and taking back my role as defense teacher for these students, Minister. Fight this decree, and Hogwarts itself will rise up against you. And you do not want to anger a castle that was built in the year 828, Minister. The magical structures from that century can be a bit violent. They still remember the invasions. You can't be the brother of Salazar Slytherin. That was almost 1,000 years ago, Fudge says at once. Yes, he is my brother, Salazar hisses in rage. Nazar looks up to discover that his brother's portrait has invaded Phineas's frame again. Phineas just looks resigned to the inevitable. I am Salazar Slytherin, and though I may be a portrait, I am legally recognized by the Ministry as a founder of Hogwarts, a source of historical accuracy, and my word is tantamount to law. Or do you wish to fight the founders on this, too? He asks as Godric, Helga, and Rowena come forth, revealing themselves in portraits on the lowest level of the office. The four of them glare down at Fudge and Umbridge in scathing disapproval. Dumbledore seems to take the entire scene in calm repose. Well, I suppose that settles the matter. Dolores will have to go to trial for the use of such an artifact, of course. Trial? Fudge stares at Dumbledore, then at the blood quill Dumbledore is still holding. Yes, I suppose you're correct. And, of course, Nazar will be our new defense teacher. So a replacement for the position is finally at hand, Dumbledore says cheerfully. Fudge sighs and secures his hat again. Fine. Dolores, you're coming back with me. Nazar waits until both Minister and his Umbridge lackey have disappeared into the flue. If I see that woman again, I'll kill her. Dumbledore wraps the blood quill in the handkerchief and puts it down on his desk, sighing. I wonder how many she tortured, and right under my very nose. I should have known. Nazar shakes off the nerves that are trying to undo him, and points his wand at the quill. The answer comes to him like a thought drifting into his mind. 28 differing houses, but of all houses. And you're right, Nazar adds, glancing at Dumbledore. You should have known, but I don't think that's your failing. Where is the defense classroom? A moment, please, Dumbledore requests. I need to alert the school as to the canceling of defense classes for the rest of the week. Week? Nazar asks, curious. Dumbledore gives him a look that at last seems to be genuine kindness, not a teaching mask. You are calm and coping admirably with the events of the last 12 hours, but I would consider it a cruelty to shove you into a teaching position before even a full day has passed. It would be good to reacquaint yourself with existence, dearest, Helga says. Do you even remember where your quarters are? Godric sounds amused. No, but does that matter? They would have been claimed. Nazar pauses. Oh, I suppose that depends on if the original defense classroom is in use. Not in the active sense, Rowena says. Nazar frowns. That isn't useful. You should seek it by yourself, Salazar suggests. Until you gain more of memories, its secrets should be yours alone. Severus glares at Nazar's brother. Please tell me it's not another bloody chamber of secrets. My other portrait already told you, head of my house. I didn't give the room that name, Salazar protests. Even my pretentiousness has limits. The classroom wasn't below ground anyway, Nazar says, amused by Salazar's reaction. They'd always just called it a chamber. Someone else must have come along to add the additional nonsense. Are you all right? Severus asks him while Dumbledore's occupied. I really did believe you were going to kill her. I considered it. Nazar sucks in a breath and then tucks his wand into his sleeve. I'm fine. Intimidating, too. Severus gives him a bland look. Are you a seer, like Salazar? Nazar shakes his head. No. Do you remember that I once told you that for scant moments, sometimes I see things clearly? He waits until Severus frowns and then nods in recollection. I get flashes of insight, or I prepare for things that have yet to be like it's a certainty without even realizing I'm doing so. Dumbledore and Severus lead Nazar to a room on the second floor, an office that still has Umbridge's belongings in it. Nazar waits while Dumbledore gathers up the woman's things. He resists the urge to ask who needs that much pink or that many moving pictures of cats. He also does not suggest throwing Umbridge's belongings into the still burning fire. Severus does that instead. Severus opens a door in the rear of the office. Nazar follows the others up 2 flights of stairs. A doorway lets them emerge out into the front section of a classroom. This would be it. 4th floor. Though the students have to use the public stairs to access it, Dumbledore says. I believe defense has been taught in the defense tower for at least 2 centuries, though I suspect longer, as no one seems to recall when this tower gained the name. It's always been named that. Look at the windows. Nazar points at the narrow windows that let in light. Archers or wands. This was a central defense point when the castle was under attack. Dumbledore seems intrigued. Did that happen often? Nazar frowns. Often enough that I actually remember it. He blinks dark spots away from his vision as he investigates the room. He pulled too much, all at once and too soon, but he can't let this stand. He can't let this be. Hogwarts should have told the headmaster that wrong was being done to the students of the school. It was interwoven in her magic. It should have. What the hell is this? Nazar prods at the magic staining part of Hogwarts' weave. It's off-colored and sickly, and it definitely doesn't belong. There is a curse on the defense position, Dumbledore informs him. There has been since I denied Tom Marvolo Riddle the post of defense teacher. Curse? Nazar stares at him in disbelief. This is no mere curse. This is interference. What do you mean? Dumbledore asks. But Nazar ignores him and places his hand against the stone, then rests his forehead against the wall. He's spoken to the magic at the castle often. He is directly tied to it, just as all the first teachers after the founders were. After 994, the student body expanded too fast, too rapidly for 4 magicians alone to keep up with all that needed to be done. For some reason, Hogwarts can't see the magic corrupting her weave. Nazar guides her sight down to that warped bit of wrongness, and then watches in vicious delight as Hogwarts obliterates that stain. The classroom feels lighter at once, like a normal part of the castle. When he turns around, Dumbledore is glancing around at the ceiling, listening as the change announces itself. Nazar can tell that Severus is aware of it on some level. His dark eyes are unfocused as he tried to discern what happened. What did you do? I showed Hogwarts that someone left something behind, hidden from her sight. Nazar leans back against the wall. All that was needed was for her to be able to see it, and she got rid of Riddle's nonsense on her own. The curse on the instructor's position was only part of the problem. Headmaster, this room was cursed. It was designed to create evil inclinations or failure. Only the strongest of your students would have been true successes. Oh, and if you'll excuse me, I'll be passing out now, he says, and blacks out the moment he finishes speaking.